Today, let's dive into a powerful story about resilience, dignity, and unexpected change. It all begins with retired Major General James Morgan, a decorated war veteran, embarking on a special trip with his beloved granddaughter to celebrate her outstanding performance in a recent exam. However, what was meant to be a joyous journey soon turned into a confrontation with blatant discrimination from a flight attendant. Unbeknownst to her, James was the hero who had once saved the life of the captain's father during a war. The tension on board not only tested the retired general's patience, but also raised profound questions about justice and compassion. What unfolded in the midst of this conflict became a transformative lesson for everyone on the plane. The question remains, did the prejudiced flight attendant learn anything from this eye-opening experience? Join us as we uncover this moving story and the human lessons it carries. If you're inspired by tales of strength and transformation, don't forget to hit subscribe so you won't miss a single moment. How would you react if you were in the granddaughter's shoes? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The arduous days in the military were long behind him, but even in retirement, Major General Johnson retained his habit of meticulousness, from his neatly pressed attire to his carefully detailed plans. His granddaughter, Anna, with bright, sparkling eyes, couldn't hide her excitement at the thought of her first flight. This was a special gift from her grandfather, a reward for achieving the highest marks in her year-end exams, a feat that made the entire family proud. "Grandpa, I still can't believe we're about to fly," Anna exclaimed, clutching her small pink suitcase with both hands. "This is my reward for doing well in school, isn't it?" Mr. Johnson smiled gently, his eyes soft with affection. "That's right, Anna. But it's not just a reward, it's also a chance for you to see how big and amazing the world really is. Learning doesn't only happen in books, but in the things we see and experience. I'm going to learn so much so I can tell Mom and all my friends at school," she said with determination. "That's the spirit I was hoping for," he replied, giving her shoulder a light squeeze as they climbed into a taxi headed for the airport. The taxi came to a stop at the airport entrance. Mr. Johnson stepped out, pulling his neatly packed suitcase behind him, while Anna flitted around excitedly, marveling at the bustling scene of the terminal. "Grandpa, the airport is so huge. How do people not get lost here?" Anna exclaimed, her wide eyes darting to the flashing signs. "It's simple," Mr. Johnson replied, gently taking her hand. "People follow the plan, just like I always teach you. One step at a time, there's no need to rush." Anna grinned, clinging tightly to his hand as they made their way to the check-in counter. But her excitement was quickly dampened as they approached. The line ahead of them stretched long, but most passengers were being served swiftly. When it was finally their turn, the check-in agent, a young white woman with a forced smile, looked up, and her expression shifted. Her gaze flickered with an unmistakable lack of warmth before she spoke. "May I see your tickets and IDs, please?" she said curtly, her tone devoid of warmth. "Where are your tickets?" the woman asked flatly, without even a hint of a smile. Mr. Johnson handed over the tickets and identification. "Here are my tickets and my granddaughter's," he said politely, his tone steady and composed. The agent glanced at the tickets quickly, then paused. "The system is showing an error. It seems like these tickets haven't been confirmed. I'll need to investigate further." "What kind of error?" Mr. Johnson asked, his brows furrowing slightly. "I booked these tickets 2 weeks ago and received an email confirmation." "One moment," she replied, her expression cold as she focused on her computer screen. Anna, who had been looking around excitedly, gently tugged at her grandfather's sleeve. "Grandpa, why doesn't she seem happy?" Mr. Johnson rested a reassuring hand on Anna's shoulder and spoke softly. "Maybe she's just having a hard day, sweetheart. Don't worry, I'll handle it." However, as they waited, passengers behind them in line were being served despite arriving after Mr. Johnson and Anna. A white couple behind them was even directed to another counter for faster service. Anna turned back to her grandfather, her face puzzled. "Grandpa, why aren't they helping us first?" Still calm, Mr. Johnson leaned toward the counter, his voice firm yet gentle. "Excuse me, but I can't help but notice that people who arrived after us are being served first. Is there an issue with our tickets?" The check-in agent flushed slightly but maintained her composed demeanor. "As I mentioned, the system is showing an error. I'll need more time to look into it." "How much time will that take?" he asked, his gaze steady but growing more assertive. "We'll get to it as quickly as possible," she replied, though she made no effort to expedite the matter. A middle-aged man nearby, overhearing the exchange, turned to Mr. Johnson and said, "Excuse me, but I can give you my spot. It looks like you and your granddaughter have been waiting long enough." The agent glanced at the man, but, instead of showing appreciation, replied curtly, "That won't be necessary. I'll handle this." She then turned away, acting as though she hadn't heard him. Anna clung to her grandfather's hand tightly. "Grandpa, why are they being so rude to us?" Mr. Johnson knelt slightly, placing a comforting hand on Anna's shoulder. "Sometimes, sweetheart, people judge us simply because we're different. But don't let that make you feel like you're any less worthy. We'll get through this together." 15 minutes later, the agent finally handed the tickets back to Mr. Johnson, but not without a sharp remark: "Next time, make sure all your information is correct. We don't want to waste our time." Mr. Johnson looked at her, a faint smile crossing his face, but his eyes were sharp. "Thank you. And next time, I hope all passengers are treated equally." As they left the counter, Anna leaned close and whispered, "Grandpa, why aren't you angry?" He simply smiled. "Getting angry doesn't change anything, Anna, but staying calm and facing it makes us stronger." At the security checkpoint, their ordeal continued. A TSA officer asked to recheck Anna's bag, even though it only contained books and small toys. Anna's eyes widened in fear as she watched them open her bag and rummage through her belongings. "Grandpa, why are they taking my stuff?" she asked, her voice trembling. "It's all right, Anna," Mr. Johnson reassured her, though he himself couldn't understand why they were being singled out. After a few minutes, the officer handed the bag back without offering any apology. Mr. Johnson simply nodded in acknowledgement, saying nothing. The two of them sat in the waiting area. Anna, who had been so excited earlier, now sat quietly, her usual cheerfulness replaced with a pensive expression. "Grandpa," she whispered, "I think people don't like us." Mr. Johnson pulled her close, lifting her onto his lap. "Anna, you know what? The world isn't always fair, but what's important is that you know who you are. What other people think can never decide your worth." Anna rested her head against his chest, her voice soft. "I'll try to remember that, Grandpa." He smiled, looking out at the sky beyond the terminal windows. "You'll do just fine, Anna. You're a little warrior, just like I once was." The dismissive remarks and lackluster service from Liz had begun to create a palpable sense of discomfort in the cabin. Anna, in her innocence, didn't fully grasp what was happening, but Mr. Johnson knew this couldn't go on. How would he handle the situation as their basic rights continued to be ignored? Stay tuned for the next chapter, where Mr. Johnson's composure will be put to the test and tensions begin to escalate. Don't forget to share your thoughts and follow the story to its conclusion. When it was time to board, Mr. Johnson and Anna lined up according to the priority stated on their tickets. But when it was their turn, the flight attendant, Liz, with her hair tied up and a forced smile, looked them up and down before saying, "Sorry, sir. You and the little girl will need to wait a bit longer. We need to verify your seat information." "Verify?" Mr. Johnson asked, his eyes sharp. "These are premium economy tickets. We've completed all the necessary procedures." Liz glanced at the tickets, her expression showing faint displeasure. "Yes, but there seems to be a small issue with the system. Please step aside." Anna tugged at his hand, her voice filled with worry. "Grandpa, what's wrong? Aren't we going to fly?" "No, Anna, we're definitely flying," he reassured her, his voice calm but resolute. "They just need a little more time to figure that out." Meanwhile, several passengers who had lined up after them were greeted with a warm smile from Liz and promptly guided to their seats. It wasn't until everyone else had boarded that Liz returned to Mr. Johnson and Anna, her tone lacking any warmth. "Your seats are 23A and 23 billion. Your checked luggage has been transferred, correct?" "That's correct," he replied curtly, leading Anna onto the plane. When they reached their seats, Mr. Johnson and Anna quickly noticed their location right next to the lavatory. The row was cramped and noisy, with the sound of flushing toilets echoing every few minutes. Anna frowned. "Grandpa, this doesn't look like the pictures I saw online." He gently patted her head. "Sometimes reality doesn't match our expectations, sweetheart. But that doesn't mean we can't make the most of it." As Liz passed by, her eyes swept over them without stopping, as if the two of them were invisible obstacles in her path. A nearby passenger, a white-haired man with a furrowed brow, watched her closely. "This is ridiculous," the man said loudly enough for Liz to hear. "Seats by the lavatory shouldn't be given to premium economy passengers." Liz ignored him, quickly moving out of the area. The plane took off, and the passengers began to settle into the flight. About 30 minutes later, Anna tugged at her grandfather's sleeve and whispered, "Grandpa, I'm cold." Mr. Johnson looked around, searching for a flight attendant. Liz appeared in the distance, chatting cheerfully with another passenger. Raising his hand, he called out, "Excuse me, flight attendant." Liz turned, her expression reluctant. "Yes? How can I help you? My granddaughter is cold." "Could we please have a blanket?" he asked. Liz rolled her eyes. "I'm afraid we're out of blankets. But I can check again." She turned away and didn't return. Anna lowered her head, wrapping her arms tightly around herself. Her voice quivered as she said, "I don't want to bother anyone." "I'm sorry, Grandpa." Mr. Johnson looked at his granddaughter, a wave of sadness washing over him. Gently squeezing her hand, he spoke in a warm, steady tone. "You don't need to apologize, Anna. Sometimes people go out of their way to make you feel like you don't deserve something. But that's their problem, not yours." Unable to wait any longer, he stood up and walked to the attendant station. Liz was standing there, chatting animatedly with a colleague. Her tone abruptly changed when she noticed him. "Sir, do you need something else?" Liz asked, her voice laced with irritation. "We requested a blanket for my granddaughter earlier," he replied, his voice calm but firm. "You said you would check, but it's been over 15 minutes and we've heard nothing." Liz crossed her arms and shrugged. "I told you already we're out of blankets. And, I do have other responsibilities." "Your responsibility," he said, his tone carrying quiet authority, "is to ensure the comfort of all passengers, including my granddaughter." "I'd like to speak with the head flight attendant." Liz hesitated, momentarily caught off guard, but then turned away, clearly unwilling to escalate the situation further. A few minutes later, the lead flight attendant, a middle-aged woman with a more professional demeanor, approached Mr. Johnson. She bowed her head slightly in acknowledgement before speaking. "Sir, I understand there's been an issue with our service. I deeply apologize for any inconvenience caused." Mr. Johnson recounted the situation in a measured but direct tone. The lead flight attendant immediately apologized again and personally brought a blanket to Anna. "Thank you," Mr. Johnson said curtly. "But I hope that your staff's attitude will improve, not just for us but for all passengers." Anna wrapped the blanket around herself, her eyes filled with gratitude as she looked at her grandfather. "Thank you, Grandpa." "You're welcome, Anna," he replied gently. Though the issue with the blanket had been resolved, Liz continued to cast sour glances at Mr. Johnson and Anna. Quietly but audibly, she made snide remarks to her colleagues about passengers who liked to make a scene, her words clearly directed at them. Anna clutched her grandfather's hand tightly, whispering, "I don't like her." "I don't either," he replied, his voice steady. "But we won't let her ruin our trip," he added, his gaze sharp but his tone unwaveringly calm. From Liz's disrespect to her sarcastic remarks directed at Mr. Johnson and Anna, the atmosphere in the cabin grew more oppressive than ever. Yet Mr. Johnson, with the steadfast resolve and experience of a veteran, decided to speak up for justice. Would his complaint be enough to change the situation, or would tensions only escalate further? Stay tuned for the next chapter, where the situation reaches its climax as the captain steps in and the story takes an unexpected turn. Share your thoughts and join us for what happens next. The announcement echoed through the cabin. Meal service was about to begin. Anna's eyes lit up with excitement as she watched the flight attendants push the meal carts down the aisle, filling the air with a delicious aroma. But when the cart reached their row, Liz stopped and gave the pair a cursory glance. "What would you and the little girl like?" Liz asked, her tone devoid of warmth. Mr. Johnson glanced at the menu. "I'll have the chicken, and my granddaughter would like the pasta, please." Liz nodded but moved on with the cart without serving them. Mr. Johnson waited, but when Liz finished serving every other passenger in their section and still hadn't returned, he decided to speak up. "Excuse me, Liz," he called, his tone calm. Liz turned back, her expression one of exaggerated exasperation. "Yes, what else do you need? We ordered our meals a few minutes ago, but you haven't come back," he said, his voice steady and composed. Liz shrugged. "Oh, I'm afraid we're out of pasta. As for the chicken, I'll have to check if there's any left." Anna tugged on her grandfather's sleeve and whispered softly, "It's okay, Grandpa. I don't need to eat." But Mr. Johnson wasn't willing to let it slide. "Liz, I've noticed that every other passenger has been served their meal. I'd like to understand why we're the only ones being overlooked." Liz gave a cold smirk, her voice laced with sarcasm. Sir, we try to serve all passengers, but sometimes not everyone can be prioritized. A passenger seated nearby, Mrs. Ellen, the same woman who had earlier spoken up for them, shook her head in frustration. Don't you see how unfair this is? She's just a little girl. She needs to eat. Liz turned to Mrs. Ellen, her tone icy. Ma'am, this is none of your concern. I'm doing my job. Her dismissive attitude only drew more attention. Passengers around them began to whisper, and some glared at Liz with clear disapproval. Sensing the situation might spiral out of control, the lead flight attendant appeared, her face betraying subtle tension. What seems to be the issue? She asked calmly. Liz spoke first, attempting to deflect blame. They've been complaining non-stop since the start of the flight, disrupting other passengers. I've just been trying to manage the situation. She's not telling the truth, Mr. Johnson responded, his voice calm yet commanding. All I did was request a meal for my granddaughter and to be treated like any other passenger. If that qualifies as a complaint, then I am certainly not the one causing a disturbance. The lead flight attendant looked at Liz, then back at Mr. Johnson. I apologize for any inconvenience, sir. I will personally bring your meals right away. Though lightly reprimanded, Liz's attitude did not change. When she returned to Mr. Johnson's row, she couldn't resist a snide comment. Well, sir, I hope you and the little girl are satisfied this time. Not everyone is used to receiving special treatment, she said sarcastically. Anna lowered her head, her small hands clutching the hem of her grandfather's jacket. Grandpa, she hates us, she whispered. Mr. Johnson gently squeezed her hand, his gaze sharp as he turned to Liz. Miss Liz, your behavior is not only disrespectful to me but hurtful to a child. If you can't adjust your attitude, I will have no choice but to report you directly to your supervisors. Liz smirked but said nothing, turning on her heel and leaving an air of tension in her wake. The situation reached a boiling point when Liz, in an attempt to shift blame, reported to the captain that Mr. Johnson and Anna were disruptive passengers. Shortly after, the captain himself descended into the cabin, his professional demeanor underlined with seriousness. Good evening, sir, the captain said as he approached Mr. Johnson's seat. I've been informed there's an issue. I'd like to hear your side of the story. Remaining calm, Mr. Johnson looked directly at the captain. I haven't caused any disturbance, sir. All I've done is request fair treatment for my granddaughter. Apparently that's too much to ask on this flight. The captain turned to Liz, who stood a few steps away, her expression still defiant. You claim they've been disruptive, he said, his tone stern. But I see no evidence of that. Liz weakly countered. I was just trying to ensure everything was handled according to protocol. The captain cut her off. Turning back to Mr. Johnson, he took a closer look, and his expression suddenly shifted. Sir, are you Major General Johnson? Mr. Johnson nodded slightly. Yes, I am. The captain stepped back, his face filled with astonishment. My father served in Vietnam. You saved his life. He's told me so much about you. I can't believe I'm meeting you under these circumstances. So you're Captain Thompson's son, Mr. Johnson asked, his tone softening slightly. Yes, the captain replied, his voice trembling with emotion. If it weren't for you, I wouldn't even be here today. The captain turned back to Liz, his gaze now icy. This passenger isn't just a VIP, he's a hero, and your treatment of him is absolutely unacceptable. Liz stammered, unable to form a coherent response. The other passengers, who had been watching intently, began to murmur among themselves. Some even clapped as the captain respectfully bowed his head toward Mr. Johnson. On behalf of the airline, he said, his voice filled with sincerity, I deeply apologize for what you and your granddaughter have endured. I will personally ensure this matter is resolved. Liz was instructed to leave the service area, and the lead flight attendant took over, tending to Mr. Johnson and Anna with care. Anna, though still a bit shy, managed a small smile when she was served an additional dessert as a gesture of apology. Grandpa, she whispered, I think I can forgive them. That's the right thing to do. Anna, Mr. Johnson said gently. We forgive not because they deserve it, but because it allows us to keep our hearts light. After the tensions on the flight, Mr. Johnson and Anna's vacation in the seaside city began with joyful and meaningful moments. Anna, wearing a wide-brimmed hat and an adorable swimsuit, giggled as she ran along the sandy beach. Mr. Johnson sat under the shade of a beach umbrella, a book in his hand, though his eyes constantly followed his granddaughter. Grandpa, I finished building the sandcastle. Look, isn't it beautiful? Anna called out, waving enthusiastically from a distance. He stood up, walking slowly toward her, his footsteps leaving deep prints in the fine sand. You've done a great job, Anna. But I think it needs a door. How else will the princess get inside the castle? Anna burst into laughter and sat down to continue perfecting her creation. In that moment, she seemed to forget all the unease she had felt on the plane. While Mr. Johnson and Anna were enjoying their vacation, back at the airline's headquarters, Captain Thompson submitted a detailed report on the incident during the flight. He emphasized Liz's discriminatory behavior toward Mr. Johnson and Anna, particularly her refusal to serve them and her sarcastic remarks. Liz was summoned for clarification. In a private meeting, she faced Captain Thompson and the HR manager, MS. Liz, the HR manager, began, his tone calm but firm. We've received a report from Captain Thompson regarding your behavior. Do you have anything to say in your defense? Liz, sitting upright with an air of confidence, replied, I was simply following safety procedures. I felt that passengers' attitude was uncooperative, and I had to act to ensure the flight's safety. Captain Thompson frowned. Are you saying that Mr. Johnson, a retired major general, and his young granddaughter posed a safety threat? Liz shook her head. Not exactly. But they kept making requests and putting pressure on me. I was just doing my job. Then why did multiple other passengers support Mr. Johnson's account and report no signs of them being disruptive? Captain Thompson asked, his gaze sharp. Liz was silent for a moment before saying, I don't know. Maybe they misunderstood the situation. The HR manager nodded but spoke in a firmer tone. We will continue our investigation. In the meantime, you are suspended from your duties until we reach a final decision. Liz walked out of the meeting room, her face still defiant. But deep down, she had no idea that a much bigger storm was brewing. A week later, as Mr. Johnson and Anna returned home from their vacation, the incident on the plane suddenly surfaced on social media. A nearby passenger had secretly recorded Liz's dismissive remarks and refusal to serve the pair. The video began with Anna sitting with her arms wrapped around herself, shivering from the cold, and ended with the heated exchange between Mr. Johnson and Liz. The footage quickly went viral, amassing millions of views and hundreds of thousands of comments. Major news outlets picked up the story, running headlines such as, Flight attendant's discriminatory behavior sparks outrage. Retired Major General and granddaughter disrespected on flight. Justice for young passenger. The airline immediately found itself in the midst of a PR crisis. Hashtags like Justice for Anna and Equal Treatment now flooded social media. Celebrities, human rights activists, and fellow veterans all joined the conversation, demanding accountability. Some notable comments on Twitter included, I can't believe this is still happening in America in 2024. We need change. Liz's behavior is absolutely unacceptable. The airline must take strong action. Thank you, Mr. Johnson, for staying calm and showing us what true strength looks like. Meanwhile, Liz became the target of public outrage. Many internet users tracked down her social media profiles, flooding them with angry comments. Under immense pressure, she was forced to deactivate her accounts. One morning, while Mr. Johnson was reading the newspaper, his phone rang. On the other end of the line was the CEO of the airline. Mr. Johnson came a contrite voice. I'm calling to personally apologize to you and your granddaughter for the terrible experience you had on our flight. We've seen the video, and there's no excuse for such behavior. Mr. Johnson replied, his voice calm but resolute. I hope this doesn't end with just an apology. I want to see real change, not just for me, but for all passengers. We are committed to taking concrete action, the CEO responded. Liz will be held accountable, and we are reviewing a comprehensive retraining program for our entire flight crew to ensure this never happens again. That same day, the airline issued a public statement. Liz was immediately terminated. A training program focusing on equality and professional conduct would be implemented for all employees. The airline pledged a significant donation to organizations supporting the rights of children and veterans. These measures helped ease public outrage, but the incident remained a powerful lesson. Anna, despite her young age, understood that something significant had occurred. When she saw a news segment about her grandfather on TV, she turned to Mr. Johnson, her eyes brimming with pride. Grandpa, because of you, people now know that no one has the right to treat others unfairly, she said. He smiled, placing a hand on her shoulder. It wasn't just me, Anna. It was you, with your courage, that made people see the problem. You've made me very proud." Anna nodded, her smile widening. "Then someday, I'll stand up too whenever I see something wrong, just like you did." Liz, after being terminated, faced intense scrutiny from both the media and the public. She realized that her discriminatory actions had not only hurt Mr. Johnson and Anna, but also cost her job and reputation. Overwhelmed by relentless criticism, Liz was forced to admit her mistakes. In a media interview, she confessed, "It was a terrible mistake. I acted unprofessionally and failed to see the impact of my actions. I hope for the chance to make amends and learn from this experience." Meanwhile, the airline rolled out a new training program focused on cultural awareness and customer service etiquette. Captain Thompson took on the role of ambassador for the initiative, ensuring that all employees understood the importance of fairness and respect in the service industry. Returning from the vacation, Anna was no longer the vulnerable girl she had been before. She confidently shared the story of the flight with her classmates and teacher, transforming a painful experience into a valuable life lesson. In a classroom presentation, Anna stood before her peers, holding a small sheet of notes but speaking with clear determination. "On the flight, my grandpa and I faced injustice. But my grandpa told me that we must never let others decide our worth. We have to be strong, and if we see something wrong, we have to stand up." The class erupted in applause, and her teacher embraced her warmly. "I'm so proud of your courage, Anna," she said. One day, a special letter arrived at Mr. Johnson's home from the airline. Inside, the CEO wrote, "Dear Major General Johnson, thanks to your story, we have identified gaps in our operations and the attitudes of our staff. We are committed to making meaningful changes to provide the best experience for all passengers, without discrimination. Thank you for standing up. Not just for yourself, but for those who cannot speak up." Enclosed with the letter were 2 first-class tickets to any destination of their choice. Mr. Johnson simply smiled, setting the tickets aside before turning to Anna. "What do you think about going somewhere entirely new next time?" he asked. Anna beamed, jumping into his arms. "As long as I'm with you, Grandpa, I'll go anywhere." To celebrate the resolution of their story, the two decided to have a special dinner at home. Anna donned her favorite dress, while Mr. Johnson put on a sharp suit. Together, they cooked beef stew and baked a cake, sharing laughter and stories as they worked. During dinner, Anna raised her glass of juice and spoke with a seriousness beyond her years. "Grandpa, I want to thank you for everything. I've learned not just how to be strong, but that I'm never alone. You'll always be my hero." Mr. Johnson chuckled and raised his cup of tea. "You know, Anna, I think you're the reason I keep fighting, not on battlefields anymore, but in everyday life. You are the future of our family." On a peaceful afternoon, as Mr. Johnson and Anna sat on the porch in their armchairs, Anna suddenly asked, "Grandpa, what should I do if someone doesn't like us next time, just because of the color of our skin?" He looked at her for a long moment before replying, "You don't need to change them, Anna. What you need to do is hold on to your own values. Remember, you don't need anyone's permission to feel worthy. This world may not be perfect, but you can make it better, one step at a time." Anna nodded, her eyes shining with determination. "I'll do that, Grandpa, just like you did." The story closes with the image of the two sitting together as the sunset bathes the porch in warm light. A gentle breeze drifts by, carrying with it promises of a brighter future. For Anna, the flight was not just an experience, it was her first lesson in confidence, self-worth, and the importance of standing up for justice. For Mr. Johnson, every day with his granddaughter was a reminder that the world can change as long as there are enough people willing to stand up. The story of Major General Johnson and his granddaughter Anna is more than just a journey on a plane. It's a testament to resilience, self-respect, and the irreplaceable value of every human being. It reminds us that sometimes, by staying calm and standing up for what's right, we can change how the world sees things. If this story has touched your heart, please help spread its powerful message. Click like to show your support, subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories, and share to pass on this lesson to your friends, family, and loved ones. Every small action you take not only supports this channel, but also reinforces the truth that respect, fairness, and compassion are values we all deserve. Thank you for joining us on this journey today. Let's work together to spread beauty and hope, making the world a better place, one story at a time.